Thank you all for coming out and joining us on Zoom. We're here tonight to talk about the solar project that is going to be done at the new middle school. This is a CMLP project. It is coordinating with the middle school building committee and that project. But this is going to be funded through the light plant. So we're here tonight to do a slide presentation to go over the whole project, as well as listen and answer your questions at the end. So I think the format we're going to go with is we'll first do the presentation, and when we're done, we can go back to any slide and answer questions. And I think we were thinking about starting with questions that were in the room, and those on Zoom could raise their hand, and then we'd follow up with those questions second. So that's the general format for tonight. And here we go. So tonight, we're going to cover the goals related to solar in town. We're going to cover the project scope, what we're doing, who will be paying for it, how it will be managed. We have some visual renderings that we received. We'll have more later. Those will be up on the website. We're going to go over the capital costs, the cost benefits, the summary of the financials, comparables, some of the resiliency questions related to the project, and the non-financial benefits. So why don't we go ahead? So Concord has done many things related to solar in town. We've got a very strong residential solar program. We have some commercial installations, but the light plant has also done 2 previous installations of solar in town that were approved through town meeting. We've also had goals set by many different reports and committees, whether it be the long range plan, whether it be our sustainability and resilience planning, whether it be our solar siting committee that happened earlier, 2011. But this has been a long-term project to add more in-town generation that is renewable, and to have Concord meet its clean energy targets, as well as do its part to help New England site more of these projects. Next slide. Oh, do you want to take this, Dave?
So the middle school project scope is a rooftop array and a canopy array. It will consist of a storage system as well. The electrical output from the array is expected to exceed the middle school's needs. And the storage system is designed to absorb the solar and then to use the solar energy that charges the battery at a different point in time. The rooftop is designed to be 503 kW, and the canopy is designed to be 773 kW. And that's DC, so it's a total combined of just over 1.2 megawatts. The annual production is about 1.5 million. And the needs, based on the information we got from the architect for the schools, is just over 1 million. So clearly it's big enough to handle the net zero desire. CMLP, as Brian said, we've been managing this as going to be an owner of the solar and storage. That was established in late 2021. This will fulfill the net zero requirements of the middle school, and it allows CMLP to progress towards in-town solar generation goals. And it is not a tax-based project, it's a rate-based project. So that means ratepayers will, be paying for this. We've shown here, what the monthly bill impact would be based on our analysis. And so you can see it's not very large per month. And then I think it's important, we'll show it as we go along, but as the project comes through year by year, the financials get better and better. This is one of the two renderings we have for tonight. Kind of gives you a good scope of the magnitude of the project. And then the next one's from the backside. And again, gives you an idea of the arrays on the roof and the canopies. We are working, the SMMA put these together, and they are working for another rendering that would be from the street, looking at the school. So you get an idea of what the canopies would look like in a rendering. So we were hoping to have that tonight, but they didn't get that finished, but we're fortunate to have a couple to start. And I'm going to turn it over to Solar Design Associates.
Hi. We're going to go over just a quick high-level technical overview of the system. I'd be happy to answer any more any in-depth technical questions during the Q&A, but we're going to keep it pretty high level for the purposes of this presentation.
Sorry, Chris, we didn't give you a proper introduction. So Solar Design Associates is an engineering firm that does projects like this. They work with architecture firms to do solar arrays on buildings and solar canopies. They have a lot of experience in doing this kind of work. They're based out of Harvard and Robert, you go by Robert or Bob?
Yes, Robert.
All right. Robert and Chris are here tonight to go through the specifics about the project. So we want to give them some time. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be important to break this into maybe three separate sections just to digest it. So we have the 500 kW rooftop system. We have the 700 and change kW canopy system, and then we have the 4 MWh energy storage system. So I think it'll make the most sense to start with the rooftop. On the next slide. So what we're recommending and what our design currently shows is a ballasted system. This is where we take the PV module and attach it to a racking system, which is held on the roof surface via the weight of the panels themselves, as well as concrete ballast blocks. So if you see in that bottom right picture there, there's a concrete ballast block. It's around 5 to 7 PSF total, and it is sufficient to keep the panels and everything else on the roof surface.
And just to clarify, this is when installing an array like this, the wind can get under the panel and act like a sail. So roofs have to be designed for a lifting force, or in this case, they have to add weight and ballast to ensure that the panels themselves aren't going to leave the roof. But this process also removes the need for a lot of punctures, which makes the roof integrity better.
And I'll also note that this method of racking is the most common for medium, large scale flat roof systems, and is tried and true, and deployed in the megawatts across Massachusetts. On the next slide, I'm showing our basis of design for the PV inverter. The function of this device is to take the energy from the PV module and manipulate it such that it can be connected to any loads, or in this case, the grid, in a usable form. It's roughly a 2 foot by 2 foot cube, and the model that we're going with is self-ballasted, similar to the racking, in which it'll just sit onto the roof surface on those rubber feet that you see there, and will be sufficient to hold itself upright and in place. And so the output from this inverter will then be subsequently routed from the building, from the roof, over to the CMLP's equipment corral over by the service transformer in the bottom left of the building plan. Moving on to the canopy system, here's an example of the canopy racking that we are suggesting. What it consists of is a 3 foot diameter concrete footing that'll be embedded within grade right off of the parking area. On top of that, a steel column will be attached vertically, and on top of that, tilted steel substructure or superstructure will be attached on top of that, in which the modules will be mounted. The design that we're going with allows for snow and other materials to be shed off of the panels into in this case, the bioswale, as opposed to that of the center of the drive aisle. So we get a nice little added benefit of keeping portions of the parking lot clean.
And Chris, how tall is, you can see that beam that comes out of the concrete there?
Yes.
That lowest part of the beam, about how high is that? I can't quite read it from here on the slide.
I believe it's 13'10"
Yeah.
as a minimum.
So large enough to get a school bus under anything.
That is exactly
to go
the height
through
that we're
a
designing
fire
around.
truck. Yeah.
Yes. And that brings up a good point in terms of height on the next slide, is our inverter mounting. And so there may have been concerns mentioned or maybe in passing of potential vandalism or potential idle hands coming by and trying to mess with certain mechanics or equipment on these inverters, on these canopies. But what we're doing is we are mounting that same inverter that we were seeing on the rooftop system. We're mounting it to the canopy steel via a mounting bracket. And it is well above any height in which a middle schooler, or probably even a full-grown adult, could get up and reach without the need for specialized equipment. So we feel confident in that. Same with the rooftop system. We're taking the output of the modules, we're routing it along the steel structure above the canopy, we're routing it to the inverter, and the output of that inverter is subsequently routed down along the side of the steel beam, undergrade, and back over to CMLP's equipment corral. And that brings us to the energy storage system. The current basis of design is 4 megawatt hours. And it has been our experience that for that level of energy density, we'd probably be looking at 2 20-foot ISO containers. And so what these battery manufacturers generally do is they will buy a standard shipping container, 20-foot by 8-foot. They'll come in, they'll put their battery cells, their HVAC equipment, their safety equipment, their control systems, and they'll put it all in the inside of this container, containerize it, seal it all up, and deliver it to site for us to just put very nicely on a pad. And the output of that will then be subsequently routed to the same point as the rooftop and canopy inverters at a switchboard in the equipment corral. And here's a good example of what that may look like. This is another project that we worked on for a municipal light plant in Massachusetts. And this is just to show the rough general scale and view of what these battery systems can look like. And also, in my opinion, look kind of nice and good. Nothing to be scared of. But that at a very high level is the breakdown of the 3 sections of the system, the rooftop, the canopy, and the battery. And yeah.
Great reminder of what summer looks like.
Yeah. We were just admiring the weather. So the capital cost of this project, the original article was asking for 13 million. That's going to be revised down. The reasons for that revision are we took another look at the project, and it originally had an 8 megawatt hour battery capacity. And that's been reduced to 4, which is a major reason why the expense was reduced. But also, we work closely with Solar Design Associates to understand the market better and what they're seeing in costs. And that also influenced the new number. So the current design is looking for a 2 megawatt inverter with a 4 megawatt hour storage capacity. So it offers better financial value for that size and scale. So you can expect that the Article 21, I believe it is, will be revised to that $7.5 million number, down from the 13. Next. So the project has many benefits. So the comparison of this project was, what could we go out and contract for a 20-year fixed cost versus building this project in town with capital. So we're kind of comparing an ongoing agreement for 20 years versus a project that we build and we own, indefinitely. And so It is a clean project, so it meets our goals of reducing emissions. But it also, being here in Concord and behind our substation, reduces some of our expenses for getting energy from our generators that are all out, around New England to Concord. And it also allows us to do more control of when we have peaks in our demand for electricity. So times when everybody wants electricity, that's when our expenses get high. This battery can discharge into those, and that's very helpful. And the solar behind the meter is very helpful as well. And it also, we can do energy arbitrage. So if we've contracted for a lot of energy and we don't need it, well, we can still charge up the battery, or we can discharge it when we need to go out to the market and prices are high. And then the ongoing cost of this installation would be any kind of maintenance, as well as the capital and financing the capital. So maintenance would be things like inverter replacement. Eventually, 10+ years, we will be looking at battery replacement. But the panels themselves are warranted for roughly, most of them are 25 years. I don't remember the specifics for this job, but yeah. So 25-year warranty on the panels, and most panels live a lot longer than their warranty. So we're not seeing that being an expense. We may decide in 30 or 40 years that it would be worth replacing the panels because panels have gotten so much better. But we're going to get our value out of the panels, and we're going to get a value out of the equipment that we're operating. And we have some more on the financial cash flow. I believe it's the next slide. So you can see here, this is the financial summary. When the staff presented to the Light Board, we went into the calculation behind this in greater detail. But this is the net present value of the project with and without the federal incentives. So there's a 25% federal incentive. If you don't mind muting yourself while you're on Zoom. So there's a 25% federal incentive, as well as we have some ARPA funding that we may be able to put towards this project. But we didn't want to guarantee that we were going to get those funds on time for when we needed the bond and the money to pay for it. So we've done two scenarios, one without any incentives, one with. The one without any incentives, the average monthly cost to a resident is about $1.70 a month for year one. And that $1.70 then in year 2, 3, and 4 keeps decreasing until we get to, I believe it's year 2035, and we end up being neutral. So there is no increase or decrease to the bill. And then you can see as we go on in the future years, it decreases, and it's a net savings to ratepayers. And if we apply that same math with the 25% credit from the Fed, as well as those ARPA funds, you can see that just simply makes everything shift to the left, and it's positive much faster. Probably before 2030, we would see savings on bills versus a 50-cent a month cost. So about $6 for each resident on their annual electric bills in year one, and then savings are greater than that in future years. Do we want to talk any more about that slide? Is there any other things that I may have should cover?
No, you hit on all the points.
All right, we'll go on to the next. So resiliency benefits. So the design of this project has been for the utility. So this is a front of the meter system. So we're using this as we would an open field where we've got production, we've got a storage, and it feeds into our distribution system. And the way that we want to see these benefits come through is by charging up that battery during the day and discharging into the times when our expenses are the highest, which tends to be around the evening. And we could even charge this at night when our costs are very low, and then lower our peaks in the morning. So you can see the schedule there listed about how we're viewing to cycle the battery. And we're still in the design process of the connection to the grid and how this battery, solar, and the building will all connect to the distribution system. So that hasn't been finalized. And the reason I mentioned that is we're unsure if it's going to be designed to actually isolate the middle school so that the battery could power the middle school. But even if that was a scenario where it could power the middle school, the way that we're operating this battery in the morning, if the power goes out at 10 o'clock, the battery may be depleted because we have been cycling it with that plan of reducing the ratepayers' expense, not for resiliency, and making sure that we have a backup power source. If in the future we decide to do that, it could be re-engineered, but today that's how we're going to pay for this, is by lowering our expenses as a utility. Next. In some of the non-financial benefits to this project, Concord has been for over a decade asking for more in-town solar. But at the same time, we don't want to just clear our forests and fill it with panels. We want to do it in a way that we get dual use out of the land. We want to make sure that we don't take up farmland that we're going to need to grow crops. We don't want to take away forests, which are absorbing carbon and have many other benefits. We want to put these projects where it makes sense. That would be on top of roofs, on top of parking lots. This is a little bit more of a premium, but you can see that this project actually has financial value in a short number of years. So even though we're doing a more expensive project to do it the way we want to do it, it's not going to cost us a lot of money to do that, and may actually still save us a lot of money. And putting it at a school is a way of us demonstrating our values to our children, making sure that they can see these things in their everyday life. They can ride an electric bus to school. They can see the solar array and it's generating clean energy, and they can see that we're not just talking the talk, we're actually doing it here in Concord, and we believe in these things. And then finally, we've made sure that the design of these array sheds snow and rain into the swells, making sure that it protects the parking area. So it may reduce the amount of snow. It won't avoid snow plowing, but it will reduce the amount of snow that's in the parking lot. And it will also ensure that no avalanches fall onto cars and dent hoods and things like that. We've taken those precautions to design it well. And then that is the presentation. So we're happy to take questions.
Have a couple pictures we can show too.
Okay, yeah, let's show some pictures of other solar canopies, because it seems to be a lot of the related questions. What is this going to look like?
So this one's from UMass Amherst. It's under construction at this point, but it has similar slopes that we have in our designs, so we thought it was relevant. This River Valley Co-op Solar is my favorite because it's similar to what we're proposing here. Has rooftops, where you can see there, has canopy solar, a little different design than ours, but it also has battery storage, which you can see right here.
Those two white containers in the bottom left of the image.
So it's very similar to what we're looking to do. Chris, do you remember where this one is?
I do not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the reason why we showed this is it's very similar in terms of the foundations that the structure will sit on. That's what we're proposing to do something similar.
It does also give a good height estimation for what it would look like at grade, and show further that there really is not going to be any worry for anyone driving under or anyone reaching up or anything along those lines.
And then the last slide here is the at Walden Pond, the canopy that you may have already seen. That's what that looks like. Little different design than ours, but just another example. And those are the slides.
Great. Are there any questions here in the room? And if you're on Zoom, if you could use the raised hand function if you have a question, that would be helpful. Mike.
My name is Michael McAteer. I live at 1615 Lowell Road in Concord. First of all, what an extraordinary step forward. As I think about how this fits into the climate action plan that many of us worked on for some time, this is an integral, important piece of that strategy, particularly as we look to achieve Article 51. I'm wondering about, as you move forward and identify a lot of the complexities, and there certainly are a lot, is the light plan thinking strategically how we can then apply what we learned here and go back to the Alcott School that I worked on in the building committee, I would say almost 20 years ago, and all of the other schools with the same principles, the same goals, and the same intent? Thanks.
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
Yeah, so this is a great project in the sense this will be the light plant's first use of utility scale storage with the array. Now we have two other solar projects at the landfill and at the Superfund site, WR Grace. And that is, I think, a little over 7.5 megawatts. So this will bring us to almost 9 megawatts of utility solar, and our goal is 20. So we're going to need to find more sites. We're going to need to do more projects like this, but we need to make sure that we do it in the interest of the ratepayers, meaning that it is not raising rates over the life of the project, that we're finding good places to do this. You know, the reason that this project is well-timed is they're building a new school. So while they're reworking the property and making major investments into it, that's a good time to do projects like this. So, you know, infiltration beds with the water department, when they rework those, we'll be looking at that site. You know, the high school is still rather new, and we can look at that, or the BD, but there's many of these properties around town. And what we don't want to do is try to meet a goal by clearing forest around our wells that we had in our solar siting program. But yes, we've learned a lot in preparing this. And by operating, we'll have firsthand knowledge of how to do best practices.
Great. This is excellent. Thank you for the good work.
Thanks. I don't see any more questions in the room. Oh, sorry, we're doing raised hands. Who?
Just quickly, Brian, 668 and there's Hill Road. What's the actual timeline? It'd be useful to put that into the project. So assuming it goes to town meeting, gets the funding, when does construction start? How long does construction take?
So it would be assuming we get approval at town meeting to take out the bond. We will go through a bid process to get actual quotes on the installation and get competition there to try to bring the price down. But the goal is to have it installed before school opens at that site. So I don't know the specifics on exactly when, because they'll have to coordinate with the building of the school itself. But the goal is to have the whole installation done when the school is opened and ready for students. Doug. And I think we should, because this is a public forum.
Two questions. I'm Doug Sharp, 401 Silver Hill Road.
Thank you.
Who's maintaining the system, and can you just say more detail about it? In particular, are the people from the school system itself going to be involved at all, or will it be strictly CMLP employees?
Yeah, so the maintenance and operation of the system will be CMLP, but they'll obviously coordinate heavily with the schools on access and when and where and how they're doing things. So it's CMLP. There's going to be a memo between the schools and the light plant to clarify all the specifics, but CMLP will, you know, if a panel breaks, CMLP will be the one fixing it, not the schools.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Can you say more about how the new system will fit into the grid? You mentioned that there are some design issues still. What are those design issues, and can you just say a little more about it?
This is, do you want to do
Yeah,
that one?
yeah.
So it's really switch gear. It's stuff that's wonky technical stuff.
So part of the project has a switch that we're having a consultant design for us so that we can go out and purchase it. It has protections for the array, protections for the school, protections for the battery. And so when you design something like that, you have protective devices in there. And that's the part the consultant hasn't finished with yet. So that's when Brian had said we may be able to backfeed into the school with just the battery during an outage. That's the information that hasn't been completed yet.
Yeah. So one of the concerns is the battery or the array when the linemen are working on downed wires and things like that, that they could think the wires are de-energized, but with the solar producing or the battery could end up backfeeding into the system. And so they want to make sure those protections are in place. Once we have that information, we'll know how that switchgear is going to be designed, and we'll be able to say if it can island or not, or if it can, when the grid goes down, run power from the battery to the building. So we don't have that answer yet.
Thank you very much for answering.
Thanks, Doug. If you don't mind introducing yourself, that'd be great.
My name is Dinos Gonatas, and I'm an electric utility consultant and primarily with projects in solar and storage and also wind, although wind is not a subject tonight. And I guess I had several questions. I think, I'm not sure if you showed the slide, which had some of the assumptions, like the cost assumptions of the canopy solar versus the rooftop solar.
A lot of those assumptions we got covered in a light board meeting.
Okay.
And it was more in the technical understanding of the project and the assumptions made in the cost benefit. That was done in the light board meeting.
That's fine. And I saw the whole presentation that was on the light board site.
Great.
And I thought those assumptions are correct. And I actually went back to some of my clients to review them, and they thought that they were fairly middle of the road.
Yeah.
And that was $3.50 per watt for the canopy, $2.50 for the rooftop. And they also said, if you did a ground mount, that would probably these days with inflation be around $1.50 per watt.
Right.
So there is quite a bit of savings that could be achieved if either the project was configured as entirely as a ground mount, or even just to remove the canopy piece of it and do it in various rooftops. And so, I mean, the cost of the project at $7.5 million is essentially could be halved if it were reconfigured in some combination of ground plus roof. And so I'm just trying to understand, the rationale for, and I understand what you're saying, but we're already doing the W projects and the landfill site. And again, I don't know if those sites are exhausted or if other rooftop sites might be available or other ground sites could be found, but that's something that was that something that was considered as a scenario? So we could make an informed decision as to what the premium is and what we're really getting for what we're paying for.
Yeah, so it definitely, there is a premium to doing the canopies. There is a premium to doing roof versus, taking farmland and placing racks and solar out there and dedicating it just to solar. So it really is a value decision with the community, because we've had in the past many town meeting articles. I think actually specifically, if I remember the feasibility study for the middle school, there was a net zero requirement in there, but there was also a requirement not to take down trees.
Okay.
So we've had at town meeting a few votes that have specifically said they don't want to see either the urban canopy or the forest canopy removed for solar. So yes, it is cheaper to build it on the ground. And when we compared it to other projects that we could buy through a contracting, those projects are more like that. They're more like on the ground, but the cost to bring that energy to Concord made this project competitive.
No, I understand. And the second piece is the storage piece. And as mentioned, I've worked a lot in storage.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I've done is analyze rates for different areas. And storage can be a winner where you have very large demand charges. And ISO New England has sort of a middle-ish demand charge. We're paying, through Eversource, we're paying, 11 dollars per kilowatt month or so. Dave, you would probably know the exact number, but.
And that's in the cost model.
Right.
It's the cost is in the contract for transmitting that energy is that $11. And then also the avoided cost of operating that battery is in that model.
So two points of caution. And one is that to reduce that demand charge, you have to have a dispatch algorithm for the battery that is very precisely tuned to the current market conditions, because you can't always tell exactly in advance when that highest demand per month is going to be. And if you're also trying to minimize the annual capacity charge from ISO New England, that's the six or so top peak hours per year. So it requires a lot of intelligence and a lot of flexible dispatch in there. So number one, I was wondering how that would work. And number two, I would have to be honest with you and say that I've done studies of various parts of the country and in California and Texas, where the demand charges are very high, where the peak off peak price differences are very high. Batteries can have positive NPVs there, but in New England, it's not the case at this time. And I was wondering, maybe it would make sense to wait until that business case develops itself and a battery can be clearly shown as profitable, separate from the other pieces.
So,
Otherwise, we're just shoveling money in the ground and not getting a return out of it.
oh no, we're getting a return of it. So we also have a substation that is in threat of running backwards, which it isn't designed for. So we have so much solar today in town that there are times in the spring and the fall in which we have solar saturation, where our load, you know, is a 70 megawatt substation running at, 5. So it's in threat of going backwards. So batteries are needed for these kinds of projects because the previous projects, solar projects before this, did not have batteries. And so it's time to do a battery project. As for hitting the peaks, I know that we're working with Energy New England, and they have a group tasked with this for all of their munis in operating their batteries, to make sure that we operate it as cost effectively as possible, to get that value out of that peak shaking. Now, we're not going to play in the regulation markets doing the frequency regulation, but we are going to do other cost avoidance operation. All right. Is there any other questions in the room before I go to Zoom? I don't see any. So Dawn, thank you for being so patient. And please ask your question.
Thank you. Don Kupka, 39 Devons Street. And at first I want to say thank you for such a thoughtfully designed presentation for us tonight. I have a question, a big picture question. If we were to master plan to have renewable power generation on town-owned buildings, what would we be doing differently here? In other words, this is an opportunistic situation, but would we, would it be more cost effective for the ratepayers to plan for rooftop solar arrays across the school buildings prior to installing the canopies? And that is building on the previous question. And secondly, I think it's key to coordinate the life expectancy of the membrane of the roof before installing solar. So this is great, brand new roof. I assume you checked with the land architect to be sure we're getting at least a 20-year warranty out of the roof, because when that roof needs to be replaced, that's when the solar will have to come down, and perhaps it'll be time then to upgrade it. But somebody mentioned earlier the Alcott School is 20 years old. So would we get a better bang for the buck, more solar power to the town for the same expenditure if we looked at the roof of the middle school and the roof of the Alcott School? Thank you.
We're looking at doing this project, but there's going to be many more projects to come. All of the municipal rooftops are being looked at. Some of the buildings are older and we need to look at the roof structure. Some of the buildings are quite small and may have a higher cost per watt that they produce. Some of the Article 38 from last year's town meeting asked us to create a list of locations and a timeline for meeting these goals that we've stated. We're still working on that because we've got to figure out the distribution side of this. How do we manage this oversupply of electricity when demand is low? Once we have more on that, we're going to get that report done, and that will answer a lot of those kinds of questions about what's the next project. and what the value is for each of those properties. I'm sorry, it doesn't display your name, the man with the bright background.
Hi, Murtaza.
I'm
Can
sorry,
you-
your name?
My name is Murtaza. I'm from 105 Hill Street.
Oh, thank you.
And I had one question. So thank you first for the presentation and for sharing the capital costs. I wanted to ask what the operational costs are going to be, the maintenance costs, and is that going to be funded by the light plant or is that going to be taxpayer funded?
Do you want to take this, Dave? I mean, I can.
Go ahead, go ahead.
All right, so it will be, it's a utility project, so any maintenance would utility, so it's not going to be from taxpayers. There are maintenance things like we know that there's a 10 to 15-year life on the inverters that take the DC current from the panels and turns it into AC and so forth. And those would be borne by the utility, any kind of operational, and that would be done mostly with a depreciation within the budgeting process to make sure, and we know what those are. So we kind of smoothed it out in this display of this financial summary. But if you look at the light plant's first presentation about the model that was used, you'll see that there's a spike at year 10. That's the inverter replacements. That's part of the maintenance of this ongoing system. Did that answer your question?
It does. So it's already factored into the total costs.
I'm sorry, the what cost?
The total cost. So
does
what I'm
factor.
trying to ask also is, will that cause a rate increase in the future or the rate increase that you shared today, which was
Yeah.
$1.50 to 70 cents, that's going to remain constant?
Yeah, so that's the year one rate increase. So the first years of the project when we're paying down the capital and the debt is more expensive. So you'll see that first year in that financial summary is going to be about, I think it was $1.15 or $1 something. And with the incentives, that's actually more like 50 cents. But we want to request from town meeting without the incentives. So we're talking $1 something. And then each year that gets a little less to the point where I think it was 2035 that it's actually on par with rates and it will then decrease. And then after 20 years or after the model that we've shown ends, we still own and operate that equipment. So it will be that maintenance of inverter replacements or other things. And eventually when we have to redo the roof on the school, because there's not a whole bunch of punctures, they're basically going to pick up all that equipment and put it aside, re-roof, and then relay it out. So there's because we own it versus contracting for power, there's some real benefits in the long run.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Kim Slack.
Hi, thank you again for a great presentation. I want to make a point that this not only fits into the town's climate action plan, but also with the state. And, you know, we are moving very quickly to try and have emissions in the state by the end of the decade. I know Concord Light Plant is planning to have 100% of its power emission-free by the end of the decade. So kudos. This I think can move us a little bit closer. So I have two questions. First is, and maybe this is covered in the school development plan, but is there going to be any car charging or bus charging where the solar energy could be used to transfer into a useful transportation?
So I can answer that. There will be conduit in the ground. Any kind of charging infrastructure is planned for the schools to provide. So the energy from the building would charge those vehicles. That way they can set the terms on any kind of fee structure.
Great. My other question, when I looked at the kind of satellite view of the arrays, they're very near the baseball field. And it made me think there will be some errant baseballs that come flying back and hit the solar panels. Is there any kind of protection of that from happening?
Well, yeah, this actually, someone else had asked me the same question, and you could go through the process of trying to protect it with big fences and barriers and whatnot, but I think that's more costly than swapping out the panel that got hit. So I don't think let them play, and if something breaks, we'll replace the panel.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. A lot of people think, because they look at solar panels and they look fragile, but I see installers walk across these things all the time. They have hail ratings for when you have a hailstorm, so they're quite durable. Doesn't necessarily mean if you hit it with a ball, it's going to break, but we've got some good baseball players. You never know. Gail Heyer.
Thank you, Brian. Let me just get myself set up here. Yeah, thanks for the great presentation. So I have just on the baseball, I actually showed my son this picture as we were eating dinner, and he said, "Mom, the baseballs wouldn't go that way, that it's angled away from it." So at least one person thinks it's not an issue. So I wanted to just make sure everyone is aware of this. I would like to urge caution in building these power plants at schools where children will be spending a good chunk of their time. Solar panels and the inverters in particular are known to cause electrical noise, also called in non-scientific terms, dirty electricity, which is known to cause detrimental health effects. And this includes nausea, headaches, and fatigue. And the people who are electro-hypersensitive are especially susceptible to ill effects from photovoltaic systems. It is possible to measure and remediate this radiation, and there are a number of consultants who do this scientific and engineering work. So I just ask the board to please be very conscious of electrical noise issues when designing and implementing this project. I had previously mentioned to the light board and pointed out that there's a school design guidance about, I think it's called the Northeast CHIPS, the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, and they have a whole section of their guidance regarding low EMF best practices. And that best practice with respect to electrical stuff says to position electrical supply rooms and building power supply adjacent to low occupancy areas, among other strategies. So, this is not something this is not something new. I didn't make this up. This is a real thing, and I just want to make sure everyone is aware of it.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, they're not displaying names. I think Christine.
Thank you, Brian. I had two questions. I observed the Light Board meeting where you went through the details on the net present value, and I'm just trying to reconcile what you discussed in that meeting to the costs that the costs and the savings that you described today. Are those the same? Are they based on the same analysis, or did anything change?
There was some changes. We had met with some solar people here in town. We've also really kind of dug into the numbers that were used, and there were some changes. Do you want to talk about? I think I remember this. There was little changes, but it wasn't anything major. I think the one thing is we used a 15-year debt term.
And we used the 20-year debt term in the beginning.
Yeah.
And we increased the inverter size, which made the battery more effective in terms of payback.
Yes.
We do fully intend on looking at a 10 to 15-year note, not a 20, but for modeling, we used the 20. So there were some minor changes that did change the numbers some. They actually got a little better. We also had some questions about the, smoothing the 10-year spike because, that's the way we normally do things through rate stabilization. So we looked at a number of those things and further enhance the model.
Yeah,
Okay.
we feedback about that spike in the previous model and they wanted to smooth that. So that's part of what you saw.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because it looks more favorable here than what I remember from that meeting.
Yeah, and it was
go
those
ahead.
small changes to, the inverter made a big difference.
Well, the debt service shortening will make a difference as well.
Correct.
Yep, at 5% or whatever the interest rate is you assumed. And my second question is on the battery. Having the battery located, I think if I understand the rendering, it's up in the sort of the lower left corner of the property.
Loading dock, yeah.
Yeah, which is right near a wooded area and also a residential area. So I'm just curious if there are any issues with the siting of a battery or anything else that could have, potential fire hazard. Yeah. So I'm just curious about that.
No, the area is going to be fenced off. It's not something the public will be able to access. And it is designed with safety in mind. So I don't have any fears about fires. If the fire did break out, it wouldn't spread because we've got, quite a large area around there. But I think better than me speaking to that, why don't I ask Chris to talk about that?
I think specifically for the basis of design that we currently have for the battery system, it will have undergone large scale fire testing in order to be cited per the NFPA requirements. So what that means essentially is that the battery manufacturer is going to, in a lab, assemble one of these containers. They're going to look at, a worst case scenario of a thermal runaway of a battery cell. And they're going to show for siting purposes that thermal runaway is not going to jump to the next cell and it's not going to cause a thermal event for the battery as a whole, or it's going to try to show that would be minimized. So any fire risk within the container is going to be minimized. And then further, any fire risk outside of that is going to be, I don't want to say none, but close to nil.
And do the containers themselves have their own suppression system?
Yes, many BESS battery energy storage systems do have integrated fire suppression systems. And this one will as well.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Pamela Dritt.
Hi, thank you. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. I think this is so wonderful. Yes, because we're going to have clean energy produced here and it'll save us money and it'll make us healthier. And it will not increase the fossil fuel infrastructure that's killing the world. And none of that is included in the cost savings that we got there.
Yeah.
How are we maximizing the solar and battery, or are we holding back for financial reasons? Could we?
I think we're maximizing the solar on the site.
How about the battery? Could we increase the battery if necessary?
I think the battery is appropriately sized. I think if we find value in enlarging it in the future, we have the space to put in something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Will there be infrastructure to add like electric bus battery vehicle to grid capability to supplement the school battery and help balance the grid? Like, for example, your 10 a.m. powder outage.
Yeah, that's my dream for the bus depot. I don't think we need to spread the fleet out across town at different.
Well, mobile emergency shelter systems, an electric bus.
Yeah. Can I move on, or do you have other questions?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Bill, what is your question?
Well, not really a question. It's a compliment, gentlemen. I think you're going to score a bullseye on a moving target. And there's no question we'll look back in 10 or 20 years ago, oh, well, that was silly. But 10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought of a battery. And you guys are right on top of it. You're talking about dispatch rates, demand management, the fact that you've got substations that are approaching running backwards. That's one of the big issues that, it's wonderful to see we're going to get this power, but the infrastructure, you're well designed into it. And I just wanted to pass along my compliments.
Thank you. That is the hard part.
A bullseye on a moving target is impossible.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions on Zoom. Has anyone in the room have any further questions? I don't see any. Well, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for all coming out in a snowy evening. And please come support the article when it comes to town meeting. Thank you very much.